I never imagined that walking into my own bedroom would change my life forever. But when I caught my husband Damien tangled in our sheets with another woman, what happened next wasn't tears or screaming. It was something that would leave him questioning everything he thought he knew about me. This is the story of how one moment of betrayal became his worst nightmare. Before we dive back in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if this story hit home, hit that subscribe button. I've got something really special lined up for tomorrow. My name is Cassandra Vale, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Damien Rothwell and I had been together for 9 years, married for 6 of those. He was a successful architect in Millbrook Heights, our upscale neighborhood just outside the city of Grandview. I ran a boutique consulting firm specializing in corporate investigations, a detail that would prove more important than anyone realized. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in late September. I'd returned early from a business trip to Silverstone City, my flight having been moved up due to weather concerns. The house on Maple Ridge Drive was unusually quiet when I pulled into our circular driveway. Damien's black Mercedes was there, along with a silver Honda Civic I didn't recognize. I remember thinking it was odd. Damien rarely had clients over at the house, and he'd mentioned nothing about any meetings when we'd spoken that morning. As I approached our front door, I noticed something else strange. The living room curtains were drawn shut. We never closed those curtains during the day. They framed our view of the manicured gardens that Damien was so proud of. Using my key, I entered through the front door as quietly as possible. The house felt different somehow, charged with an energy that made the hair on my arms stand up. I could hear sounds coming from upstairs, muffled voices, movement. My first instinct was concern. Had something happened to Damien? I kicked off my heels and padded silently up the carpeted staircase, my investigative training automatically engaging. Years of corporate surveillance work had taught me to move without making noise, to observe before being observed. As I reached the second-floor landing, the sounds became clearer. Laughter. A woman's laugh that definitely wasn't mine. My heart began to race, but not with the panic you might expect. Instead, a cold, analytical calm washed over me, the same feeling I got when I was closing in on evidence in a difficult case. I approached our bedroom door, which was slightly ajar, and peered through the gap. What I saw should have devastated me. Damien, my husband of 6 years, was in our bed, the bed we'd chosen together, the bed where we'd shared countless intimate moments, with a woman I'd never seen before. She was young, probably mid-20s, with long auburn hair spread across my pillows. They were so absorbed in each other that they hadn't heard me come in. But here's the thing that surprised even me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't burst through the door in a fit of rage. Instead, I stood there for exactly 37 seconds. I counted, watching and analyzing. My brain was processing details the way it did during professional investigations. The woman's clothes were scattered across our hardwood floor, a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, expensive heels, jewelry that caught the afternoon light streaming through our bedroom windows. This wasn't some random affair. This looked established, comfortable, routine. I noticed Damien's behavior too. He was different with her than he'd been with me in months. More animated, more passionate. He was laughing at something she'd said, running his fingers through her hair with a tenderness I hadn't seen directed at me in over a year. That's when the real shock hit me. Not the betrayal itself, but the realization that I felt relieved. Relieved to finally understand why Damien had been so distant, why our conversations had become purely functional, why he'd been working late so many nights, why he'd suddenly developed an interest in weekend conferences and business trips. I backed away from the door and made my way downstairs with the same silent precision I'd used coming up. In our kitchen, I poured myself a glass of the expensive wine Damien kept for special occasions and sat at our granite island thinking. This wasn't a moment of passion or a one-time mistake. The comfort level between them, the expensive clothes, the fact that they were in our home, this was an ongoing relationship. How long had this been happening? Who was she? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? I could have confronted them right then, could have stormed upstairs and demanded explanations, could have thrown them both out and called a divorce lawyer immediately. But my professional instincts told me to wait. In corporate investigations, the biggest revelations always came from patience and careful planning, not emotional reactions. As I sat there sipping wine and listening to the sounds of my marriage falling apart above me, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be the hysterical, betrayed wife. I wasn't going to give Damien the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I was going to treat this like any other case. I was going to investigate, gather evidence, and then, when I had all the facts, I was going to act. But not in the way anyone would expect. 20 minutes later, I heard movement upstairs, voices, the shower running. I calmly finished my wine, rinsed the glass, and slipped back out the front door. I drove to the coffee shop on Elmwood Avenue and waited there for 2 hours, giving them time to leave. When I returned home that evening, Damien greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and asked about my trip as if nothing had happened. He was showered, dressed in fresh clothes, and our bed had been meticulously remade. "How was Silverstone?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Productive," I replied, watching his face carefully. "Very enlightening." If only he knew how enlightening it was about to become. The game had begun, and Damien Rothwell had no idea he was already losing. This one took us ages to get right, so if you're loving it, hitting subscribe would honestly mean the world to us. Okay, back to business. The next morning, I watched Damien get dressed for work with new eyes. Every movement, every gesture, every casual comment became a piece of evidence to analyze. He hummed while choosing his tie, something he hadn't done in months. There was a lightness to his step, a contentment that hadn't been there when it was just the two of us. "I'll be late tonight," he said, adjusting his collar in our bedroom mirror. "The Thornfield Plaza project is hitting some snags. Might have to work through dinner." "Of course," I replied, applying lipstick with steady hands. "I understand completely." But understanding and accepting were two very different things. As soon as Damien left for his architectural firm downtown, I began what I called Operation Clarity. My corporate investigation business, Vale Consulting, had taught me that successful cases required 3 things: systematic data collection, pattern analysis, and impeccable documentation. If I was going to uncover the truth about my husband's double life, I would treat it like any other case. First, I needed to identify the mystery woman. The silver Honda Civic from yesterday was my starting point. I had memorized the license plate, a habit from my professional work that now served a very personal purpose. A quick call to my contact at the Department of Motor Vehicles in Grandview revealed the car belonged to Natasha Winters, age 26, address listed as Rosewood Apartments on the south side of town. Natasha Winters. Now she had a name. Next, I accessed our joint credit card statements online. What I found made my coffee grow cold as I sat in my home office. For the past 4 months, there had been charges I'd never questioned before, but now they painted a clear picture. Expensive dinners at Bella Corte, the upscale Italian restaurant in Riverview District. Hotel rooms at the Grand Meridian downtown. Jewelry purchases from Tiffany & Co. Jewelry I'd certainly never received. But the most telling charges were the recurring ones. A monthly payment to something called Sunset Gardens Luxury Suites. A quick online search revealed it was an extended stay facility that catered to business professionals and people in transitional living situations. Essentially, it was where people stayed when they wanted the comfort of home without the commitment of a lease. Damien had rented Natasha an apartment. My hands trembled slightly as I printed out 6 months' worth of credit card statements. The paper trail was damning. Damien hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been financially supporting another woman's entire lifestyle, while I contributed equally to our household expenses, unaware that my money was indirectly funding his betrayal. The deeper I dug, the worse it became. I accessed our joint bank account and discovered something that made my breath catch. 3 months ago, Damien had withdrawn $15,000 in cash. When I'd asked about it at the time, he'd said it was for business equipment. Now I knew better.
I called my assistant Riley and asked her to clear my schedule for the rest of the week. Tell clients I'm working on a high-priority case that requires my full attention, I instructed. It wasn't a lie. My next stop was Rosewood Apartments. The complex was newer, modern, with the kind of amenities that attracted young professionals. I parked across the street and waited. At 2:30 p.m., the silver Honda Civic pulled into the parking lot. I watched through my telephoto lens, another tool of my trade, as Natasha Winters emerged from the car. She was even more beautiful than I'd realized from my brief glimpse yesterday. Tall, graceful, with that auburn hair catching the afternoon sunlight. She was carrying shopping bags from expensive boutiques in downtown Grandview. What struck me most wasn't her beauty, though. It was her age. She looked so young, so carefree. While I was 34 and building a business, worrying about mortgages and retirement plans, she was living a subsidized fantasy funded by my husband's generosity. I followed her, at a discreet distance, as she went about her day. Coffee at the trendy cafe on Willowbrook Street, shopping at the designer consignment store on Fifth Avenue, a manicure at the upscale salon in Thornfield Square. Every stop was paid with a credit card I now knew was linked to Damien's account. That evening, I installed discreet recording software on Damien's laptop. It was technically legal. The computer was jointly owned marital property, and I had every right to access it. What I discovered in his browser history and email drafts made my earlier findings look innocent by comparison. Damien wasn't just having an affair with Natasha. According to the email threads I recovered, he was planning to leave me. The messages, sent from a private Gmail account I'd never known existed, detailed his strategy for managing the transition. In one particularly damning exchange, he'd written, "Cassandra is so focused on her business, she barely notices when I'm gone. By the time she realizes what's happening, everything will be in motion. The house will be sold, assets divided, and we can start fresh in Portland like we planned." Portland! They were planning to move across the country together. Another message revealed something even more shocking. I've been consulting with divorce attorney Jonathan Pike. He says California's community property laws mean I'm entitled to half of everything, including her business assets. Cassandra built Vale Consulting during our marriage, so I have claim to 50% of its value. My husband wasn't just cheating on me, he was systematically planning to financially destroy me while making it look like an amicable divorce. I sat back in my desk chair, staring at the evidence spread across my computer screen. Bank records, credit card statements, photos, email threads. Everything painted the picture of a man who had been living a double life with meticulous precision. But Damien had made one crucial mistake. He'd chosen to betray a woman whose profession was uncovering the truth that people desperately wanted to keep hidden. As I began organizing the evidence into a comprehensive file, my phone buzzed with a text from Damien. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." I looked at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Love you too. Take all the time you need." Because now I knew exactly how much time I needed to prepare my response. And unlike Damien's plan, mine wouldn't be discovered until it was far too late for him to do anything about it. The investigation phase was complete. Now it was time to move to the next stage of my strategy, one that would turn Damien's carefully laid plans against him in ways he could never imagine. After all, he'd forgotten one important detail about the woman he'd married. I didn't just investigate other people's secrets for a living. I destroyed careers with them. Now came the delicate part, playing the role of the unsuspecting wife while simultaneously orchestrating Damien's downfall. For the next 2 weeks, I became an actress in my own home, perfecting a performance that would make him feel completely secure in his deception. I started small. During breakfast conversations, I began mentioning how overwhelmed I felt with work, how maybe I should consider scaling back Vale Consulting. "Maybe it's time to think about starting a family," I said one morning, watching Damien nearly choke on his coffee. That's wonderful, Cass. I think that would be really good for us. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand, probably thinking about how much easier his divorce plans would be if I voluntarily reduced my business assets. Meanwhile, I was quietly implementing phase 1 of my own strategy: asset protection. Through a series of perfectly legal maneuvers, I began shifting ownership of Vale Consulting's most valuable contracts to a subsidiary company I'd registered in Delaware, a company wholly owned by a trust with my sister, Melody, as the beneficiary. Damien knew nothing about corporate law, so when I casually mentioned restructuring for tax purposes, he nodded along without interest. I also opened several new bank accounts at institutions where Damien and I had never done business. Slowly, methodically, I began redirecting payments from my largest clients to these accounts. On paper, Vale Consulting's visible assets were shrinking. In reality, I was simply moving money beyond Damien's reach. But financial protection was only part of my plan. I needed leverage, something that would give me complete control when the time came for confrontation. That's when I decided to introduce Natasha Winters to the concept of consequences. Using a burner phone I'd purchased with cash, I created a fake social media profile for a wealthy businessman named Christopher Reynolds. The photos were stock images I'd purchased legally, a distinguished man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and expensive suits. According to his fabricated profile, Christopher was a venture capitalist who had recently relocated to Grandview from Seattle. I spent a week establishing Christopher's digital presence, creating a believable backstory complete with fake business connections and a portfolio of impressive investments.
I spent considerable time crafting Christopher's persona. He was charming, but not overeager, successful, but not boastful, interested in Natasha, but not desperately so. Through careful conversation over several dates, I learned everything about her relationship with Damien. She believed Damien was unhappily married to a workaholic wife who didn't appreciate him. She thought their love was destined, that they were soulmates who'd found each other despite the cruel circumstances of his existing marriage. Most tellingly, she had no idea about Damien's plan to claim half of my business assets in the divorce. He says his wife is totally absorbed in her career, Natasha confided to Christopher during their third coffee meeting. I was sitting 3 tables away listening through a discreet wireless earpiece connected to the recording device I'd hidden in Christopher's jacket. She barely notices when he's gone. He feels so lonely and unappreciated. It was fascinating to hear my marriage described from Natasha's perspective, a version where I was the villain keeping 2 lovers apart, rather than a woman being systematically betrayed and financially manipulated. But the most valuable information came when Natasha mentioned Damien's timeline. He says he needs to wait until after the Westbrook Convention Center project is finished, she told Christopher. It's his biggest contract ever, and he can't risk any distractions. But once that's done in December, he's finally going to ask for the divorce. December. That gave me exactly 6 weeks to prepare. Phase 2 of my plan involved creating controlled chaos in Damien's carefully ordered double life. Using my investigative contacts, I arranged for Natasha to receive an anonymous tip about a fantastic job opportunity at Morrison & Associates, a prestigious marketing firm in downtown Grandview. The position would require her to relocate to their new branch office in Denver within 60 days. Simultaneously, I ensured that Damien's Westbrook project hit some unexpected complications. As someone who'd worked extensively in corporate consulting, I knew exactly which permits could be delayed, which inspections could find minor violations, and which subcontractors could suddenly become unavailable due to scheduling conflicts. None of these delays were illegal or directly traceable to me. They were simply the kind of bureaucratic frustrations that plagued construction projects every day. But their timing created the perfect storm of stress for Damien.
Within 2 weeks, he was spending 16-hour days trying to resolve issues with the Westbrook project while simultaneously dealing with Natasha's sudden news about the Denver opportunity. I watched him grow increasingly frantic, making phone calls at all hours, snapping at contractors, and losing the confident composure that had made him so attractive to his young mistress. The pressure was having exactly the effect I'd hoped for. Damien began making mistakes, forgetting to delete text messages, leaving credit card receipts in his pockets, staying out later than his alibis could support. He was becoming sloppy, desperate, and most importantly, he was beginning to doubt whether he could maintain control of his complicated situation. Meanwhile, I played the perfect supportive wife. I brought him coffee during his late-night work sessions, rubbed his shoulders when he complained about project stress, and listened sympathetically when he vented about incompetent city officials causing delays. "I'm proud of how hard you're working for us," I said one evening, watching him pace around our living room while shouting into his phone at some poor contractor. The word us made him flinch slightly. By now, there was no us in Damien's mind, only the increasingly complicated logistics of managing his exit strategy while keeping his current life from completely unraveling. But I saved the most elegant manipulation for last. 3 weeks before Damien's planned December revelation, I arranged for him to discover that Vale Consulting was being considered for a massive contract with the state of California, a 3-year deal worth over $2 million. I made sure the preliminary paperwork arrived when Damien was home, made sure he saw the potential dollar amounts, made sure he understood that this contract would more than double my business's value. His eyes lit up with greed so transparent it was almost pathetic. 50% of $2 million suddenly made his timeline seem much less urgent. "Maybe I should hold off on some decisions until after the state contract is finalized," he mentioned casually the next morning. "What decisions?" I asked innocently. "Oh, just business things, professional stuff." I smiled and kissed his cheek. "Whatever you think is best, darling. I trust your judgment completely." If he only knew how completely I'd been manipulating that judgment from the very beginning. Phase 3 was ready to begin, and Damien Rothwell still had no idea he was dancing to music I'd composed specifically for his destruction. By early December, all the pieces were in position. Damien's Westbrook project was hemorrhaging money due to the delays I'd orchestrated. Natasha was growing increasingly frustrated with the Denver job opportunity she couldn't accept while waiting for his divorce timeline. And my fake state contract had inflated his expectations for what he'd gain from our marriage's end. But I needed one final catalyst, something that would force Damien to reveal his true nature in front of witnesses that mattered. That catalyst came in the form of our annual holiday party. Every December, Damien and I hosted an elegant gathering for Grandview's professional elite. Architects, lawyers, business owners, city council members, everyone who shaped our community's landscape, gathered in our home on Maple Ridge Drive. It was the social event Damien looked forward most, his chance to showcase our success and network with the city's power brokers.
This year's party would be different, though he had no idea why. I spent weeks crafting the guest list with surgical precision. Jonathan Pike, the divorce attorney Damien had been secretly consulting, received an invitation, ostensibly because he'd recently been elected to the Grandview Bar Association's board of directors. I also invited Rebecca Martinez, the most influential gossip columnist for the Grandview Herald, whose Society Spotlight column could make or break reputations in our tight-knit professional community. Most importantly, I invited Christopher Reynolds. Creating a physical presence for my fictional businessman required considerable preparation. I hired Marcus Chen, a struggling actor I'd found through a talent agency in downtown Grandview, to portray Christopher for one evening. Marcus was the same age and build as the stock photos I'd used, and with the right styling, he could convincingly embody the role I'd created. I briefed Marcus extensively on Christopher's backstory, mannerisms, and most importantly, his relationship with Natasha Winters.
You've been dating her for 6 weeks, I explained during our rehearsal session. You're smitten, but trying to play it cool. You know she's involved with someone else, but you believe she's going to leave him for you. Marcus was a better actor than his struggling career suggested. Within hours, he'd internalized Christopher's character completely. The party began at 7 p.m. on December 15th. Damien wore his best charcoal suit and worked the room with his characteristic charm, discussing the Westbrook project's challenges while carefully avoiding any mention of its true financial impact. I watched him operate, marveling at how effortlessly he could present himself as the devoted husband while texting Natasha between conversations. At 8:30, Christopher Reynolds arrived. Marcus played the role perfectly, introducing himself to other guests as a venture capitalist exploring opportunities in Grandview's growing tech sector. He was charming without being overbearing, confident without being arrogant. Several guests expressed genuine interest in his fictional investment firm, but his real performance began when Natasha walked through our front door at 9 p.m. I had extended the invitation through Christopher, suggesting that she might enjoy meeting some of Grandview's influential residents. She'd accepted eagerly, probably hoping to network her way out of her current dependence on Damien's financial support. She looked stunning in a deep blue cocktail dress that I recognized from our joint credit card statements, another gift from my husband that I'd unknowingly funded. Her auburn hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she moved through our home with the confidence of someone who believed she belonged there. Damien's reaction when he spotted her was immediate and visceral. His face went pale, then flushed red. He nearly dropped his wine glass, catching it just before it could shatter on our marble floors. I watched from across the room as panic flickered in his eyes while he tried to calculate how to handle this unexpected collision of his two worlds. Natasha, meanwhile, made her way directly to Christopher, greeting him with an intimacy that several guests couldn't help but notice. She'd been led to believe this was their first public appearance as a couple, that Christopher had invited her as his date to introduce her to his new business associates. "Darling," she said, linking her arm through Marcus's and kissing his cheek, "this house is incredible. You have such wonderful friends in Grandview." The word darling carried across our living room like a shotgun. Rebecca Martinez immediately perked up, her journalistic instincts activated. Jonathan Pike, who'd been nursing a scotch near our fireplace, suddenly looked very interested in the unfolding drama. Damien tried to approach them, probably hoping to separate Natasha from the crowd before she could cause further damage, but I intercepted him smoothly. "Honey," I said, taking his arm with wifely affection, "come meet the Hendersons from the Planning Commission. They've been asking about the Westbrook project." For the next hour, I kept Damien occupied with conversations he couldn't escape without seeming rude. Meanwhile, Christopher and Natasha became the party's focal point. Marcus was brilliant, regaling guests with stories about their romantic courtship, while Natasha glowed beside him, clearly thrilled to be presented as the chosen woman of such an impressive man. But the true fireworks began when someone asked how they'd met. "Online," Natasha answered before Marcus could respond. "Christopher reached out after seeing my posts about the new art gallery downtown. We've been inseparable for weeks." 6 weeks, 3 days, Marcus added with practiced romantic precision. "Not that I'm counting." The timeline was impossible to miss for anyone paying attention. Rebecca Martinez was definitely paying attention, her phone discreetly recording audio while she pretended to check messages. That's when Damien finally lost his composure. Unable to watch the woman he'd been financially supporting for months publicly claim another man as their romantic partner, he broke away from our conversation about municipal zoning and approached the crowd surrounding Christopher and Natasha. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "but I think there might be some confusion here." The room fell silent. Every conversation stopped as guests sensed approaching drama. Natasha turned, and for a moment, genuine fear flashed in her eyes as she realized Damien was about to expose their relationship in front of dozens of Grandview's most influential residents. "Damien?" she said quietly. "What are you doing?" "One of I doing? What are you doing? Who is this man, and why are you pretending?" That's when I decided to deliver my masterstroke.
Oh, my goodness, I exclaimed, moving to stand beside my husband with perfect wifely concern. Natasha, what a wonderful surprise! I had no idea you'd be here tonight. Every eye in the room turned to me as I continued with practiced innocence. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Natasha Winters. She's been such a tremendous help to Damien with the Westbrook project. Haven't you, dear? Natasha's confusion was evident, but she nodded hesitantly. In fact, I continued, pulling out my phone, I have something that might interest everyone, given how much Natasha has contributed to my husband's work. I opened the photo album I'd prepared specifically for this moment. Dozens of images showing Damien and Natasha together at restaurants, hotels, and her apartment, all taken during my surveillance operation. The photos were professionally shot and undeniably intimate. I thought it would be nice to create a little slideshow of Damien's professional relationships, I said, connecting my phone to our smart TV with practiced ease. The first image appeared on our 75-inch screen, Damien and Natasha kissing outside the Bella Corte restaurant. The second showed them entering the Grand Meridian Hotel together. The third captured them in an embrace outside her apartment building. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as photo after photo displayed my husband's affair in high-definition clarity for everyone to witness. But I saved the best revelation for last. As gasps and whispers filled our living room, I pulled out a thick folder and addressed the crowd with calm authority. I suppose this is as good a time as any to share some other interesting discoveries, I announced. For instance, did you know that my dear husband has been consulting with Jonathan Pike here about divorcing me specifically to claim 50% of my business assets? Jonathan Pike went white as every head turned toward him. Or that he's been using our joint credit cards to fund a secret apartment for Natasha while planning to move with her to Portland after financially destroying me. I opened the folder, revealing bank statements, email printouts, and legal consultation receipts. Or perhaps most interestingly, that the Westbrook project he's been working so hard on is actually 3 weeks behind schedule and $200,000 over budget, meaning the city contract he's been bragging about will likely be terminated for breach of performance. Damien stood frozen in the center of our living room, surrounded by colleagues, clients, and community leaders, as 6 months of lies unraveled in real time. That I wasn't finished. Looking directly at Natasha, who was still clinging to Marcus's arm in confusion, I delivered the final blow. And Natasha, dear, I think you should know that Christopher here isn't quite who he appears to be. I nodded to Marcus, who stepped forward and removed the expensive watch I'd bought him for this performance. My name is actually Marcus Chen, he said with apologetic professionalism. I'm an actor hired by Mrs. Rothwell to play a role tonight. We've never actually met before, and I'm sorry for any confusion this may have caused. The silence that followed was deafening. Natasha's face went through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, realization, humiliation, and finally, rage. Damien looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in slow motion. Rebecca Martinez was frantically taking notes. And I stood in the center of it all, surrounded by the wreckage of my husband's carefully constructed lies, feeling more powerful than I ever had in my life. Now then, I said pleasantly to our stunned guests, who would like more wine? California's community property laws have exceptions for cases involving fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and deliberate waste of marital assets. Damien's secret spending on Natasha, his attempt to manipulate divorce proceedings through deception, and his failure to disclose the true financial status of his business ventures constituted textbook examples of all three exceptions. My attorney, Patricia Wells, whom I'd retained months earlier while Damien was still consulting with Jonathan Pike, presented a case so airtight that Damien's hastily assembled legal team advised him to settle rather than face a trial that would only generate more negative publicity. The settlement hearing took place in Judge Harrison's chambers on a gray February morning.
Damien looked like he'd aged 5 years and 2 months. His hair had thinned noticeably, stress lines had deepened around his eyes, and the confident posture that had once made him so attractive had given way to a defeated slouch. Natasha wasn't present. She'd fled to Denver the week after our party, taking the Morrison and Associates job offer that had never actually been intended for her. My contacts in the corporate world had made sure she received several opportunities far from Grandview, and she'd grabbed the first one that offered escape from the social wreckage of her relationship with Damien. "Mrs. Rothwell," Judge Harrison said, reviewing the settlement documents, "your terms are quite generous, considering the circumstances. Are you certain you don't wish to pursue additional damages?" I looked across the conference table at Damien, who was staring at his hands. "No, Your Honor. I believe this arrangement is fair." Fair. Damien kept our house on Maple Ridge Drive, his remaining business assets, and enough liquid capital to restart his life somewhere else. I received everything else: my business in its entirety, our investment portfolio, the vacation property in Napa Valley, and most importantly, my freedom. But the real justice wasn't financial. It was watching Damien realize that every move he'd made over the past 6 months had been anticipated, countered, and turned against him by the woman he'd thought was too absorbed in her career to notice his betrayal. "How?" he asked me as we left the courthouse. It was the first word he'd spoken directly to me since the night of our party. I stopped on the courthouse steps, adjusting my coat against the February wind. "How what, Damien?" "How did you—" He gestured helplessly, unable to finish the question. "How did I know? How did I plan all of this? How did I stay ahead of every move you made?" I smiled, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. "You married a woman who investigates deception for a living, and then you tried to deceive her. What did you think was going to happen?" He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. I walked to my car, a new BMW I'd purchased with money from the contracts I'd secured after news of my brilliant crisis management skills spread through Grandview's business community. Apparently, orchestrating the downfall of a cheating husband had enhanced rather than damaged my professional reputation. 3 months later, I ran into Marcus Chen at a coffee shop in downtown Grandview. He'd landed a recurring role on a television series filming in Los Angeles, partly based on the glowing recommendation I'd written about his exceptional performance abilities under pressure. "How are you doing?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "I sometimes feel guilty about my part in all that." "Don't," I replied, stirring sugar into my latte. "You helped me reveal the truth. There's nothing to feel guilty about in that." We talked for a few minutes about his new career opportunities, and as he prepared to leave, he asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you just confronted your husband directly that first day? If you'd skipped all the strategy and just demanded the truth?" I considered his question while watching pedestrians hurry past the coffee shop windows. "I think he would have lied," I said finally. "He would have gaslit me, made me doubt what I'd seen, convinced me I was imagining things or overreacting. He might have ended the affair temporarily, become more careful, waited for a better opportunity. I would have gained nothing except the knowledge that I couldn't trust my own perceptions." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "So instead, you made sure everyone else could see the truth too." "Exactly. When the evidence is overwhelming and public, there's no room for manipulation or revision. The truth becomes undeniable." 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Natasha Winters stood in my reception area, looking older and more mature than the young woman who'd once lounged in my bed with my husband. "I know you probably don't want to see me, but I needed to thank you." I invited her into my private office, curious about what had brought her back to Grandview. "The job in Denver opened my eyes," she explained, perched nervously on the edge of my guest chair. "Working for myself, supporting myself, building something that belonged to me, I realized how much of my identity had been tied up in being taken care of by someone else. Damien made me feel special, but he also made me dependent." She paused, gathering courage for what came next.
I also realized that everything he told me about you was a lie. You weren't a cold, career-obsessed woman who didn't appreciate him. You were just living your life, building something meaningful, while he was manipulating both of us.
I listened without interrupting, recognizing something in her voice that hadn't been there before. Genuine self-awareness. "I know I can't undo the damage I helped cause," she continued, "but I wanted you to know that I understand now. What he did to you, what we did to you, was wrong. And the way you handled it, I've never seen anything like it. You didn't just get revenge, you got justice." After she left, I sat in my office thinking about the difference between those two concepts. Revenge would have been destroying Damien purely for the satisfaction of causing him pain. Justice was ensuring that his actions had appropriate consequences while protecting myself and building a better future. That evening, I drove to our old house on Maple Ridge Drive. The new owners had painted it a different color and redesigned the gardens, but it was still recognizably the place where I'd once believed I had a perfect marriage. I didn't feel sad looking at it. I felt grateful. Grateful for the skills that had allowed me to uncover the truth. Grateful for the strength that had let me turn betrayal into empowerment. Grateful for the reminder that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that happens to you. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Wells. The California state contract came through. Congratulations on building something that's entirely yours. I smiled, started my car, and drove toward my future. A future that belonged completely to me, earned through my own efforts and protected by my own intelligence. Behind me, the house on Maple Ridge Drive grew smaller in my rearview mirror until it disappeared entirely. Some stories end with forgiveness, others end with reconciliation. This one ended with something better: freedom, justice, and the unshakable knowledge that I would never again allow anyone to underestimate the woman who investigates truth for a living. After all, the most dangerous person to deceive is someone who knows how to uncover every lie you've ever told. 2 incredible stories are waiting for you right below. If this one grabbed your attention, these next ones will too. Click to dive in.